Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a beautiful spring moment here where I am. And I'm out walking the lake, as I often do. It's one of the most amazing nearby living places, even though it's right in the middle of a city. Or, I guess the middle depends on one's perspective, which is something I'm going to explore today. So I have three kind of bookmarks in my mind. One is circumambulation, circling around, which is an entirely different form of travel than what most of us do. And I have a long history with circumambulation. We might say it's a magical practice, but it depends on what your purpose and perspective is, what you'll come up with. So there's that. There's generalizations, which is when cognitively we collect under some rubric or token a vast and complex landscape of situations, thereby thinking quite devastatingly to our capacities for insight or intelligence that we know what something is, someone is, what men are, what temperature is, what light is, what time is, what women are, what organisms are, and so forth. And this is one of the most dangerous forms of scripted indoctrination that we learn as we become enlanguaged and enculturated. This generalization thing. I have some other bookmarks as well. Perhaps one of them is temperature. And these are all deeply related. So I'll go through, I'll bird walk around these three anchors today. So if you walk in a circle, right, a strange and very useful example of this is, this is an uncommonly un-Darwinistic example, and I'll change it to a more Darwinistic one. So if you look at what we call a telephone pole, which are the remnants of the telephone systems and electrical distribution systems that were once the mainstay of our anti-society. Back in the day when you were speaking to a person on the phone, the chances that someone nefarious was listening and recording and analyzing were about zero. I mean, they weren't, zero, but they were vanishingly small, depending, of course, on what kind of a person you are and whether or not you had awakened the interest of a systemic process somewhere in the government primarily, the FBI, the CIA, the police, and so forth. In any case, if you look carefully at the structure of the telephone pole and you circle it, from different distances too, right? Not just circling it. What you will discern from any specific location will differ dramatically from what you will see and understand from another angle of approach. So, we should transfer this awareness into cognition, particularly if we're thinking about dangerous topics like identity or function or purpose, or the most profound of all of them really is origin. So a lifetime spent circling things, being dissatisfied with the view from a single angle. I'm actually walking in a circle right now, effectively around the lake. And in the process of circumambulation, you will see features slowly reveal themselves, become central or prominent, and then slowly disappear. And this is much more like what intelligence uses to understand phenomena, to relate with them, to participate with them, not just to derive an identity or a purpose or a function or an origin. That's a very simplistic version of that possibility space. There's a reason why, rather there's a nature, a purposive spirit to ancient societies building circular gathering places for humans. And there's a preferential hierarchy of value, right, that so for example, if you're going to a concert, there's the really good seats and so forth. And even though our modern situations aren't circular, and obviously a circle, right, will place half of the audience at the back of the phenomena unless the people are dancing around on the stage, in which case you'll get something very dynamic. So I was trained by a non-human intelligence to hold no fewer than 3 and at least 5 to 7 perspectives in awareness, and switch back and forth between them and link them up. And when I'm speaking with someone who is struggling or has, quote, a problem in their mind, this approach produces insight nearly instantaneously. Whereas if I collapse into the first move, right, I think I know what's going on, so I form a biased anchor or an anchoring bias, my chances of insight, they don't entirely disappear, but because I'm tricky, but they're dramatically reduced, inhibited. So when I'm speaking with somebody who's got a problem, I circle the problem and look from various angles of concern and purpose, origin, function, and then I also listen very carefully, of course, to their voice. and particularly to the things they stutter on or begin to say and draw back. Of course, I'm much better at doing this with and for others than I am in doing it with myself, though I do occasionally employ those heuristics with my own problems. I'm much better at doing that with a wise companion who is similarly motivated, and particularly the perspective of the heart, the emotional aspect of our being. It's probably the most primal perspective and the one that gets least attention. And in modern psychotherapy and so on, emotion has kind of been replaced by this idea of trauma, which is very unfortunate in my view. If we validate the trauma of another person, this concretizes it. And just the validation of it tends to set it in stone. This isn't to say there are no traumas. It's just an extremely complex topic.
No, right there, turtle. Yeah, that's a dog. You're tripping. It's a turtle.
One young man was pointing at the animal we refer to with the term turtle and saying it's a turtle, and the other young man was saying no, it's a duck. There was a duck nearby, not actually a duck, a diving bird. But you can see here, right, that with two people you have two perspectival origins. And if the goal is to determine who is right, you can forget about insight and intelligence. These have little to do with determining what is correct. That thing is like the gravestone of what might have become insight, because what you want is to move in such a way that you see more beautifully, more clearly, more heartfully, more intelligently each time you make a move. That has nothing to do with getting it right. That has to do with getting it alive. Bringing awareness and intelligence and insight and memory to life. Resurrecting them from the graveyard of representations. Which are themselves useful, but when they dominate, it's the end of seeing.
And when I watched it in the UK, I was like, I don't know what that bird is. Like, what the hell is that? Yeah.
So when you're considering a question something you wish to see deeply into, something you wish to know from within, rather than from without, circling it is very profound. And what I mean by this, of course, is circling it so that your angle of approach, your purpose of approach, has at least 3 positions, right? And resists the gravity of the first most compelling positions. so that it sustains at least three positions, one of which its purpose should be to see anew, to see more clearly, more beautifully, more profoundly, more vitally, more dynamically, more alive, more organismically. There are no separate phenomena. We are not separate. Each one of us, it's not the macrocosm and the microcosm. It's the macro-microcosm. We're being produced moment to moment by the entire history and future. It's not just that you were born at some time in the past and you die sometime in the future. Factual as that perspective may be, it's mostly useless or even dangerous in terms of gaining insight and understanding, which is something that happens now. It's a present moment experience. So resist the urge to collapse into one or two anchoring biases. An insight will seek you out like lightning and obliterate the fictions which have dominated your thought, your behavior, your relationships, your histories, your life. The spirit of liberation is alive. You're made of it. You're born for it, like fish for water or birds for the sky. Don't forget.
Yeah, there's a bridge.
No. Hold on right there.
Mhm. It is the between of things where insight lives. The twilight, the dawn, the liminal spaces, hypnagogia, hypnopompia. But also get the experience of physically circumambulating when you have a question or a problem. Find a central figure, tree is a really good one, and just circle it. Very powerful, very ancient method. So, generalizations, I'm not sure how long I'm going to talk about this today, but the generalizing abstractions that are so popular as to be the primary mode of human cognition, a mode that makes you dumber every time you use it, with the very few exceptions where it's actually functional. I need to think of I'm not really prepared for this discussion. I just had kind of a thorn in my in my mind about this. So if you look at the current American political situation, if you could even call it that, I think that would be a kind of a terrifying lie to call it that. It's not really a political situation at all. Of course, you can take that angle of approach, but what you'll see is a library of monumentally stupid generalizations about people, situations, causes of problems, solutions for problems. And these are being produced by effectively like a small cadre of idiotically megalomaniacal like non-humans in human bodies.
Such poor stuff. Like, you really have to.
As if, I don't know, what? It's ideological, yeah. But it's all based on generalizations, and the specific approach to the generalizations is self-falsifying. So the more impossibly untrue it is, the more easy it is to convince masses of people that this is the cause of their dis-ease and discomfort and disenfranchisement and so forth. Right? The actual situations are nuanced and complex. They can be understood if one's goal is understanding, but that's not the goal of the current climate in the country in which I was born.
We can do a bunch.
So this is a good example of the problem, but I've seen, for example, women on social media complaining about men, and let's face it, there are sort of common problematical aspects to the behavior of some men in some places at some times. And, they're catastrophically horrifying in some places, these problems, and then they're almost absent in others. So you can see that whatever's being generalized about is a topology, and these specific women want to yell at one of the valleys in the topology. And then they want to transmit the functions and features that they're upset about from that valley to the entire landscape. And similarly with men, talking about women, some men, some women. When the seeing eye of our mind becomes driven by a personal grudge or vendetta, it's extremely problematical what tends to ensue thereafter, because we ourselves become pawns to the overriding goal of demonizing some faction, gender, cohort, place, situation. And most of the actual causal stuff isn't in men or women. It's not in cohorts either, though it surely looks that way. It's in what produces them. It's in origin. This is where the problems are. Their origins, the origins of these particular persons or groups. Yeah. What they've been captured by. And everyone has pain. And everyone, not everyone, most of us have, historical things that we did or were done to us or we experienced that are very painful and confusing. And we want answers about them, but unfortunately we are inclined to go for very simplistic generalization answers. Oh, men are impossibly stupid, like whatever. So this is why I say, resist the gravity of the biases, the anchoring biases that will deprive us of insight. If we want to see, we have to see into ourselves and our own patterns, our scripts, our fairy tales, and how these play into the situations in which we encounter the bad thing, the bad person, the bad collective. So I ask that you learn to recognize when false generalizations are being made, especially those that render an extremely complex topology into a single feature and then equate that single feature with the entire topology. This is the most dangerous thing commonly in human thought, or it's among like the top 3 dangers. Resolving this thing cures a bunch of diseases in a mind.
Papa, biking કરવું છે?
There's a lot of angelica here. This amazing plant spirit. It's very powerful spirit. It's not an accident, its name. Yeah. I'd like to get some of the roots, but I don't want to hurt the plants. The roots are powerful. A few days ago, I had an experience that was important. And I haven't forgotten the last bookmark, temperature, which will illustrate the problem with generalization. So, I had an appointment, and the first time I went to the appointment, the order had not been placed properly, not by me. It's not my fault. Someone else did something wrong. And so, I discussed the situation with the people who ordered the appointment, and it seemed to have been resolved properly. There was a lot of confusion. So then I got up kind of early and I was like, okay, let's get this managed, and I went. And the place was closed for lunch when I got there, so I got there sometime around noon. And, the natural inclination is to suppose that my plan is the most important thing. It's the right thing. It's the thing that should be happening. And then I can take offense and have a little inner tantrum of some kind. Everything just always goes wrong. Which is generalizations, blatant lie. But I could become very attached, right, to my rather stupid, and I'll show the stupidity of it momentarily, desire for, quote, the fulfillment of my objective, unquote. But suppose that my perspective, right, I'm not circling the thing. I have a single valued goal set, motivation. Not circling it. I've collapsed into the simplest anchor possible, and I'm biased now. And I think, oh God, why these people, everything just goes wrong. Which I didn't really think, although there was some temptation there to go in that direction. So I realized, well, I know this area somewhat well. There's a couple of interesting places nearby. One of them is a telephone booth that's been converted into a sort of free bookshop. And just a little ways beyond that, there's another pile. There's like an outdoor shelf on which there are often very interesting books that people have contributed for free. And I'm, a bit of a book hound. So I thought, well, I'll go I'll go to the telephone booth and see what the books are. Right? It's like 20 minutes away on walking. So I walked over to the telephone booth, and it was empty. I mean, there were like 6 or 7 books there. There's usually 100 books there. So I thought, okay, I'll walk up to this other shelf. I think it's on Clayton or Cole Street. It's right on the main drag. And I got there, and it was also mostly empty, almost no books. And so it turns out that one of the most amazing, weird, magical places surviving in modern San Francisco is also nearby here. It's a bookshop founded by a brilliant and eccentric and beautiful spirit probably 40 or 50 years ago. It's called The Sword and the Rose. And this is a gathering place for occult practitioners. It's very small. It's in the back of a garden. And I know of it. I've had a few minor adventures involving it. So I walked over there, and the owner, Patrick, is probably 76, brilliant spirit, was there in conversation with his friend. And I wandered in. They don't know me. I know a bit about Patrick. And I was listening in on their conversation and realized, like, oh my God, this is an oasis of intelligent, insightful, historical, memorial, magical awareness. So I hung around for a while, and then, they asked me a few questions, and I got to participate in their conversation for an hour and a half. And so I got to make Patrick's acquaintance, which was brilliant and beautiful. And but there was a weirder thing that happened, which is that when I first went into that bookstore, they had a very uncommon book there. It's called The Green Mysteries. It's not ungettable, but it's hugely expensive to try to find a copy, especially of the first edition. And I'd been there a couple times when it was there, and then I realized what it was, and then I went back and it was gone, and there was no way, I thought, to get it again. And so this book that I've been looking for months, expensive book, was there. And I got to buy it at basically retail price, right? It's a $300 to $600 book if you want to try to get it from one of the maybe 2 copies available on the internet. It also turned out that the copy that I got was hand numbered, and I got copy number 999, which, for those of you inclined to gematria or isosophy or numerologic awareness, very special copy. I won't say more about that here. So having had that kind of success, right, never in my mind did I think, I'm going to go to this appointment, but I'm going to end up meeting a magician in a magical bookstore and get a book I've been looking for months that's impossible to get, largely impossible. We tend to cleave to what we think should happen, but we have no perspective of the topology of the opportunity space, the possibility space, what would actually be good for us. And so, we get this kind of transactional bias. On this day, I managed to resist it. I still experienced the gravity emotionally. but its volume was very low, meaning like it wasn't loud in my awareness. And finding the path that I had planned on blocked momentarily, I decided to explore around it. Right? I circled instead of collapsing. Yeah. And in this case, turned out beautifully. When I finished, I went back and had my appointment. I got, everything sort of fell naturally into place. As long as the gripping hand of my mind was willing to ungrasp and play within the situation. Almost all of the problems that we face emotionally, cognitively, creatively, intellectually, philosophically, spiritually, they are problems that have a really weird set of two components. And the first is that we expect the fulfillment of a kind of a transactional aspect of our intention over a specific interval, and if it is not delivered over that interval, well, damn the universe. Right? This intervallic gravity, right? It has to happen now. It has to happen this week. It has to happen this month. This is very weird, very strange. And there's a converse thing that's also devastating to us, which is if someone mistreats us in some point of time, or they say something very mean, right? We will tend to concretize that, many of us, and project it over all time. As if, I'm gonna have to take a pause here to say hi to a friend. As if they painted us with a symbol that is permanent, right? It is we who permanentize it. Perhaps they were having a bad moment, right? And they said, "You're a blah blah blah, gravity flat," right? Or "You're just a this." And then we take that moment and we generalize it over time. You see, this is the same kind of weird problem. An inversion of the generalization thing, where someone says or does something and we generalize it to our entire life. Is that trauma, or is that a problem in perspective? So, yeah, both of these things have become apparent to me. I was watching family therapy with my son last night, and in one couple, a young woman had said something very explosive to her husband. And he was saying, surely she didn't actually feel or think this. He was doing the opposite. He was saying, there's no chance she felt or thought or still thinks this. She was just upset. And she was saying, no, I actually do think this. So this is an inversion of what I'm saying, right? I will rejoin the recording after a bit. I have to say hi to my friend Nancy DeStephanis from Brooklyn, the blue heron lady of the lake. Okay, so that was an amazing visit. Once again, right? I think I'm going for a walk around the lake. I'm going to make a recording. But then I see Nancy, the blue heron lady, and she is such a character, like Patrick. What an amazing, complex human being, So we have to be sensitive. Keep the circle open, right? There are times when that's not the most important thing to do. But even if you're, a surgeon or someone who has a very skillful vocation, when you open up a specific human body in a specific circumstance, you have expectations about what's going to go on, but you're going to be called on to improvise. So you have to have both skill sets, and it's very much the same with music, depending on, how your relationship with music is. So attend the possibility space around, especially when you find your mind collapsing to a single valued perspective. That's a good reminder to relax the grip, circle the concern or the question or the situation, and see it from a number of different angles. And pick one that leads you to new ways of seeing, at least one, if not more. All right, so my last bookmark, which is very similar in spirit. So imagine, this occurred to me the other night. I was slightly intoxicated. But, I'm reading McGilchrist's The Matter with Things. And the first probably third of that 2-volume monumental work is relatively boring because it's very repetitious. It's a lot of evidence for McGilchrist's primary thesis, which has to do with the collapse of awareness, insight, and intelligence into abstract generalizations and sort of the way of being in consciousness or awareness that is very much associated with the left hemisphere, quote unquote. It's a extreme simplification, but useful nonetheless. So I was thinking about temperature, and I suddenly realized that this is one of the weirdest generalizations that we make. So if someone asks you what the temperature is, what they want to know most of the time is what's the generalized, right, atmospheric temperature. And obviously the temperature is going to be varying. I've heard stories that say it's impossible to take an accurate temperature reading in direct sunlight, which is very interesting, if true. It's a useful perspective, though, even if it's not true. So then I realized, imagine the difference in the temperature graph. If you take the graph, just suppose you had a kind of a magical technology that when you look at an area, right, you can see the temperature. You could imagine a virtual tech, right, some goggles you put on or something, and they show you the complex graph of temperature. So they show you the temperature in each leaf, in the fish in the water itself, in the various places in the water, in the sky, inside the tree, at the surface of your body, inside your bones, right? All these things. And now you will see a symphony of temperatures, a vast orchestra of one of the primary ways that the organisms sustain life on this world, by mediating the temperatures together, right? If you could just trace all the lines between all the organisms in a living place, say you're in the middle of a jungle at a pond, and there's no artificial structure there at all, except what you're carrying. Those things will have temperatures too. But you would see this symphonic regeneration of the life space not just in the separate things, but in their relationships. So then imagine, since we're being imaginative, that you have a way to see the relational webs between all the beings as if they were colored threads. And you can actually see the flow in these threads. And you can imagine even further that you can see the meaning of the threads and their transfers and this relationship. Now, compared to taking the atmospheric temperature, and this is what we do in thinking, right? This is the problem with generalization. We take the temperature of the atmosphere. We don't take the temperature of the plants or the animals or the pond. We just have a single valued derivative over the entire topology. And this makes us stupid because we don't think of one of the most fundamental features of our experience in our world in a multi-layered, a multi-register topological graph or a sphere graph, right? You can arrange this magical data any way you like, and we may not have a technology that allows us to do precisely what I've said, although we have things like IR goggles and stuff like that, things that see heat, right? But I'm imagining something very elaborate where we see the dances of all the temperatures and how they relate to one another and where the exchanges are happening and why they're happening. I mean, you could keep adding features, right? You could see, like, when was this relationship established in time? How long does it last? You could temporalize it. So when you begin to think this way, just as a thought experiment, right, you begin to see that phenomena that you think have single values, oh, it's 67 degrees out. Is it? When? Right? Is actually nowhere where it's, exactly 67 degrees. So what you're seeing is just a fiction of generalization over an incredibly meaningful primordial topological map, so to speak, right? Mountains and valleys, hot and cold. And this is a great example of the problem. It's 67 degrees out. Really, on the surface of your skin, what's the temperature? What's the temperature inside your eye? How does that temperature change over time? What changes it? And if you're measuring, see, there's different ways to measure it for different purposes. So I think you can see how dangerous the generalization principle is from this example. We do this with identity, right? We think, oh, that's a this. Now, in truth, right, if you were to encounter me, imagine the different ways of encountering me, right? Suppose that we get in an argument at a fruit stand, and that's the me you encounter. Suppose that on another day you encounter me again, but I'm in a prison cell. Or you encounter me again, and there are government agents pointing guns at my head. Or you encounter me and I'm swimming in the ocean. Or you encounter me in a context where a group of very sensitive and intelligent people are deeply exploring some topic. Or you encounter me as the chef for your meal. Or you encounter me in a bad traffic accident. Right? Or you just encounter me casually. We exchange a few words at a gas station. Yep. So am I the same one in all of those cases? Am I the same one? Which part of me is the same one? Which aspect is the generalization? What is it, my name? Okay. My social security number? My birth date? My blood type? Are any of those things me? No, those are my designators. Right? Those are pointers that help bad things track me. Yeah? So it's very important to understand that identity is fluid and human identity transforms unimaginably dramatically depending on context and circumstance. Let's go back to the temperature thing. Okay. So in context one, you're in a jungle, say in the Amazon, and all the living beings there are exchanging temperatures. Context two, you're downtown in a city. There are hardly any living beings. Most of them are under extreme stress. Most of the temperatures are artificially false. Right? They are the temperatures of the surfaces of buildings in the wind, sunlight, so forth. Yeah. The temperature exchange system is anti-biological. It's bad for organisms. It does not serve them. It serves other things. Dead things. And keeping them dead is important, right? You don't want insects in the buildings. You don't want mice or other synanthropes in and around the buildings, so you do everything you can to kill those off, right? You regularize the terrain, you regularize the temperature. There's no symphony there of life. A tiny bit. You might have some bushes and shrubs and houseplants inside the buildings or something, maybe. Maybe not. So these are both the same planet, but they are not the same planet. And if you encounter me, or if someone encounters you, in a context that's very limiting, then they will have a very limited derivation, a generalization of, quote, who you are. But if you encounter someone in a context, or if you forge a context with and for others in which you can explore the depth and the possibility space of not just your humanity, but all that is beyond your humanity, that you, in fact, are also, the generalizations fall away immediately, and we realize, oh my God, all of the humans are divine beings. Yeah. Very obvious, this problem. We generalize, we take the temperature of people's identity according to what? Really bad heuristics, dumb, generalized heuristics for purposes that suck a lot of the time when we're not doing something beautiful. So these are some of my thoughts today. I'm so grateful to have this time together to explore them and to unforget together and see and learn and grow. I'm grateful to all those who came before and who will come after me, and the urgent hope for the liberation and spiritual, emotional, and intellectual development of our people and our living world. I wish you blessings and beauty, insight and liberty, joyful communion with living beings and other humans, amazing dreams, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation. Please take a moment to tickle the algorithm, ask a question, comment, like, share, support me if you wish. That all helps my work, which is given out of the spirit of communal concern, awareness, and freedom. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.